Some cities don't disappear in fire or collapse. They vanish and become legends. Archaeologists know that they existed and have been looking for and arguing over their location for centuries. We know these places existed. They appear in royal records, administrative texts, and historical accounts. From the capital of Middle Kingdom Egypt to a hidden center of resistance to the Spanish conquest. Today, we are exploring 5 cities the ancient world knew well and that the modern world is still searching for. Spoiler alert, there's no Atlantis or El Dorado in today's video because we're focusing on the search for real archaeology. Somewhere beneath deserts, fields, and jungles, these ruins still exist, waiting to change what we know about the ancient world. So join me and let's dig in to 5 lost cities that archaeologists are still trying to find. The first question you might be asking today is, how exactly do you lose a city? They're pretty big. Well, it's a complicated process. Human civilizations are not stable over long periods of time, and a place that was once considered a major center of the world can become a backwater or a ruin in less time than you might think. Human factors like wars and political events shift the center of power in a region if they don't already completely burn and raze cities to the ground and drive out the inhabitants overnight. Natural factors like plagues, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, hurricanes, etc. can suddenly make a place pretty dangerous to live in. Trade routes can rise or fall in importance due to economic or technological shifts, which affects the settlements that lie along and depend upon this said trade route. Cultural shifts can also be a factor. A place that was once important for one reason or another can then fade into obscurity when we inevitably get distracted by the shiny new thing somewhere else. When a settlement is abandoned, it goes through a few different processes. Firstly, initially when people leave, they don't tend to just pick up and walk away, leaving everything behind them perfectly intact. They dismantle and take with them whatever they're going to need for where they're going next. Then nature comes in, either blowing in sand or soil that builds up and eventually buries structures, or growing over the structures and obscuring them in forested and jungle environments. This then leaves behind a hill that can look like it's part of the natural landscape, especially if there's a lot of other hills around you. Living memory of the settlement and its location eventually fades, and this combination of natural forces and human inaction ends up in the settlement being lost in the sands of time, so to speak, even if it's still mentioned in the history books. There are way more lost cities out there than you can imagine, and they are not always eager to give up their secrets. Finding and definitively identifying them can easily become the life's work of an archaeologist. Today's video is sponsored by AncientCyprus.com. Cyprus, inhabited over 12,000 years ago in the pre-ceramic Neolithic period, boasts a long and complex archaeological history. AncientCyprus.com is dedicated to fostering interest in Cypriot and Levantine archaeology and supporting archaeology communication. Their work encompasses a diverse array of projects, from developing articles on topics like early Bronze Age pottery to producing 2 billion pixel surface scans of ancient objects and creating extremely high-res 3D models of archaeological ceramics that allow for detailed inspection of surface damage. The organization's goal is to document the entirety of Cypriot and broader Levantine archaeology and material culture. In sponsoring this video, all they want you to do is check out their website, which is linked in the description of this video, so head there after this to learn more about ancient Cyprus. The first lost city on our list today comes to us from Egypt and dates back over 4,000 years to the Middle Kingdom period, during which a rich body of literature was written, bronze metalworking appears, and some of the most exceptional jewelry from the ancient world was crafted. The earrings that you're seeing on screen now are ones that I own, and they're vintage replicas of a pendant from the tomb of a Middle Kingdom princess. This period reached its peak with the kings of the 12th dynasty, who focused their attention on restoring the glories of the Old Kingdom while accommodating new beliefs and innovations in style and architecture. The first king of this dynasty, Amenemhat I, try saying that 3 times fast, went so far as to erect a new capital city hundreds of miles to the north to replace Waset, aka Thebes. He called this new city Itjtawy, which translates to Caesar of the Two Lands. It was built in his 20th regnal year, although the earliest mention of it is from a funerary stela not belonging to him that dates to the 30th year of his reign. Interestingly, Itjtawy's name glyph is different than that of other Egyptian cities. They typically have this very helpful X marks the spot as a part of their name, as you can see with the examples of other cities like Men-Nefer and Waset. Instead, the glyph of Itjtawy seems to be surrounded by a fortified enclosure. This has led to one suggestion that it was a small capital consisting of administrative buildings and a royal residence, and that was only inhabited by royal staff, while the major economic and cultural centers would have remained in the south. Itjtawy was officially used as the capital during the 12th and 13th dynasties until the invasion of Egypt that led to the fall of the Middle Kingdom, when the kings then abandoned it and retreated back down south to Waset. Itjtawy's location is currently unknown. Our evidence that we do have suggests that it lies beneath modern cultivated fields east of the pyramids of Amenemhat I, who built it, and Senusret I, located at the pyramid site of Lisht. This is close to the traditional boundary of the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, and the combination of a relatively short occupation, small size, and proximity to the Nile floodplain are all reasons why we haven't found this city yet. We have narrowed its location down to a still very large area measuring 4 by 6 kilometers. A few years ago, Dr. Sarah Parkak used space satellite remote sensing technology to map out the landscape of this area, looking for very subtle changes in the topography. Her team were able to trace the ancient course of the Nile, and near that identified a small hill that they wanted to take a closer look at. A team of Egyptian scientists took soil cores from this location, and when they got 5 meters down and underneath a very thick layer of mud, they found a dense layer of Middle Kingdom pottery. They also found pieces of worked stone, including carnelian, quartz, and agate, which were the most commonly used gemstones from this period. And this indicates the presence of a jeweler's workshop in the area. These 2 hints are not definitive proof that this is the location of the city. It just demonstrates that, there was probably a jeweler's shop there. But hopefully, further planned work at the site will be able to reveal this ancient capital once and for all. Our second lost city comes from Mesopotamia. I already covered the most famous lost city in this region, Akkad, the capital of the world's first empire, in my video on lost discoveries, which you can watch right after this one. Don't worry, it'll all be linked. But did you know that the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers are dotted with the ruins of many, many cities? Today, I want to introduce you to Irisagrig, which lies somewhere along the ancient course of the Tigris. What makes it interesting is that while we don't know exactly where it is, we do have artifacts from it in various antiquities collections around the world. Around 3,500 cuneiform tablets from Irisagrig have been illegally dug up and sold on the antiquities market, with the illegal looting reaching its peak during the Iraq War in 2003. This means that these objects have no traceable origins for archaeologists to use and find the city. Its location is only known to the people who have looted it and who, surprisingly, haven't come forward with that information. If you're new to archaeology, cuneiform was the writing system used for several Mesopotamian languages, and it was most commonly written on clay tokens and tablets that were then fired. This example that you see here is not something that I bought on the black market, but is actually from when I did a year of Babylonian in my undergrad. Our professor thought it would be fun to have us do our midterm and final exams as authentically as possible, so we wrote them in clay using reed styli, and then he got them fired and we were able to keep them after. I painted them a few years ago to look like lapis lazuli because otherwise they looked quite underwhelming. Anyway, you may have heard of Irisagrig because of the Hobby Lobby smuggling scandal, where its billionaire owner bought nearly 40,000 artifacts to fill his Museum of the Bible, which in itself is a controversial institution that really I should do its own video about. Eventually, it was discovered that some of his artifacts had been smuggled illegally into the US, and in 2018, officials seized thousands of looted items from the collection. Around 450 of the stolen objects were cuneiform tablets, and of that, 250 were from Irisagrig, and included records of allocations of sustenance plots to royal dependents, the food distributed to the dogs of the palace, and food allocations for royal envoys and other officials that also detailed their work, which included inspecting work on a canal and improving the royal road. These tablets were repatriated to Iraq before they could be fully recorded and published, but many more are found in collections across the USA, Australia, Canada, the UK, Germany, France, and more. From this assemblage, we know that Irisagrig was occupied roughly 4,000 years ago. During the time of the Ur III Empire, it was a major provincial capital and transportation hub. Thanks to the numerous records produced at that time, we know a lot about the city, its daily life, and its interactions, especially which are trade-related, with other parts of the empire. One particularly fascinating insight these tablets give us is into ancient fashion, particularly the shoes worn by high-status women. For example, Bakartum, wife of the city's governor, received an annual provision of 36 fine-quality women's boots, which works out to 3 pairs per month. Ninzagesi, a governor's daughter, and 4 royal concubines usually received white boots, while Shatmami, wife to the state chancellor, used green boots, as did Shatshushen, but in a smaller version or size. Additionally, all these royal women also received red boots on 2 occasions. Were these perhaps the first Louboutins? A few of those tablets provide geographical information on Irisagrig's location relative to other ancient cities. So we know that it was on or near the banks of the Tigris, it was near the city of Kesh, it lay on the Tabimama Canal, it took boat towers 4 days to travel from the city of Umma upstream to Irisagrig, and travelers from Irisagrig to the city of Dare began their journey by boat. However, the problem is that there are several sites that could fulfill all of this criteria, and contrary to what you might think, when you dig up a city, it often doesn't come with a sign that says, "Welcome to Irisagrig," or etc. So far, nothing definitive has been found at any of these cities, but hopefully as archaeological work in the country slowly resumes, we will come across the lost city before any further looting erases it forever. Our third city takes us to the Korean peninsula and the capital of its earliest recorded kingdom, Gojoseon. According to Korean mythology, the kingdom and its capital city were established by the legendary king Tangun over 4,300 years ago. While this king is a mythological figure of whom we have no actual physical evidence that he existed, some think that his legend may be rooted in the reality of the kingdom's early development. Chinese historical records suggest that Gojoseon emerged much later. A 7th century BCE history, the Guanzi, mentions that it was an important kingdom. 600 years later, another history called the Shiji states that the capital city was Wanggeom-seong, Wanggeom-seong. But I know I'm butchering that pronunciation. I'm sorry, I've done my best. However, these records are frustratingly silent on the location of the city. For a long time, historians believed that it was in the vicinity of Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, based on what appeared to be a reference in the Shiji to what eventually became Pyongyang. In the 1960s, a rare joint Chinese-North Korean archaeological excavation took place in China's Liaoning province at the site of a massive Gojoseon-era royal necropolis containing 140 people buried in wooden coffins across 23 tombs. Their grave goods were rich and included a bronze mandolin-type dagger, a highly standardized type of artifact that's heavily associated with this period and kingdom. The size of the necropolis and the presence of the daggers has led some researchers to conclude that Wanggeom-seong must have been in the vicinity of this dig. Additionally, many of these daggers have been found in Liaoning province, further supporting the idea that Wanggeom-seong might have been located there. According to Chinese sources, Gojoseon was invaded and conquered by Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty in 108 BCE. Nonetheless, tombs with wooden coffins unique to this kingdom continued to be built across what is today North Korea until at least the early 1st century CE, so 200 years later. Some historians believe this shows that the Gojoseon leadership maintained their power and control of the region, and that this culture carried on for around 100 years after Chinese histories say the kingdom ended. Since Wanggeom-seong was the center of Gojoseon's influence and power, identifying it could provide researchers with clues as to how the influence of this kingdom endured past the date that it was traditionally thought to have ended. However, China and North Korea completely turned their backs on one another after their joint excavation, and current information on progress towards finding the city is both difficult to find and not necessarily trustworthy considering the political agenda of the leaders of North Korea. For example, they claim to have found the tomb of the legendary founding king and have made a whole monument to it, but other scholars think that they've basically just used this to try and, again, further some propaganda, and it's not actually connected to him in any way at all. Next, we head to the Eurasian steppe and the capital city of the Golden Horde, called Sarai, which means palace in Turkic. For those of you not brushed up on your Horde history, this was an independent state within the Mongol Empire, initially led by descendants of Jochi, Genghis Khan's officially recognized, but possibly not biological, eldest son. From the 1240s until 1502, the Islamic Jochid dynasty and their successors held sway over the western Eurasian steppe, as well as much of Russia and Central Asia. Jochi's son Batu is said to have founded Sarai as a seasonal residence near the banks of the lower Volga River sometime in the 1250s. It was effectively the capital of a great empire, although in true nomadic style, the center of government was wherever the Khan was, and he moved and resided periodically at other sites as well. The earliest coins struck at Sarai come from the 1260s. A second capital, called New Sarai, how imaginative, is thought to have been founded 125 kilometers upstream in the 1330s, when the Golden Horde was at its peak. The reasons for the relocation are not clear, as is how substantial such a relocation actually was. Sarai and the other major centers of the Golden Horde along the lower Volga benefited from trade and exhibited a significant degree of cultural prosperity. It eventually had a population of roughly 75,000 people. But this was threatened by the onset of chronic political and military instability alongside competition for the throne after 1361. As the traditional capital and a rich and prestigious prize, Sarai became a target and was conquered, leveled, and sacked repeatedly until it was fully burned down to the ground by the Grand Princes of Moscow in 1502. Local residents then began to reuse the mud bricks from the city, effectively wiping it out from the landscape. The location and identity of Old and New Sarai have been the focus of decades of debate in Russian archaeology. Arguments have centered on whether or not there were actually two cities or just one that might have been expanded, as well as where exactly they are located. Hindering efforts to locate them is that there are almost 100 Mongol-era settlements along the lower Volga that could be these sites, which are also, once again, helpfully buried without welcome to signs. Geez, you think people would have just thought of that to make it a bit easier for us nowadays. Using historical records to pinpoint the location is complicated by the shifter river course of the Volga, similar to what happened with the Nile, over the past 500 years, as well as the fact that descriptions of Sarai were written by outsiders to the steppe, not the Mongols themselves. Some archaeologists think Old Sarai stood on a cliff at the edge of the Aktuba River, a tributary of the Volga, at the site of Siletrena, with New Sarai located at the site of Sarevsko. Currently, Siletrena is one of the largest archaeological sites in Russia and has been excavated since 1959. Its excavators have concluded, largely based on coinage that they found there, that the settlement's construction began no earlier than the 1320s/30s, meaning it could be New Sarai, but not Old Sarai, leaving us to still answer the question of where the older settlement might be. Our last lost city today takes us to the jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, where archaeologists are searching for the white jaguar city of the Lacandon Chol Maya. Called Balam in its original language, it was established in the depths of the jungle as a place of resistance during the Spanish conquest of the last remaining independent Maya region in the late 1600s. It was inhabited by hundreds of people who lived in more than 300 houses and was a refuge for Maya rebels determined to remain independent. The Spanish tried and failed to find the community, only succeeding when the leader of a different Maya group offered to escort Catholic priests there in an effort to convert the residents of the city. In 1695, a military expedition was organized to complete the conquest of the Lacandon jungle and pacify the region. When the Spanish arrived in Balam, most of the Lacandon Chol fled from the city, and the conquistadors renamed it as our City of Sorrows of the Lacandon, turning it into a colonial settlement for the religious and political control of the region. It was then abandoned and disappeared from colonial sources in the year 1712, when the colonial authority ordered the relocation of all of its inhabitants due to the economic difficulties of maintaining an isolated city in the depths of the jungle. No human presence, expeditions, or settlements in the region were recorded again, and the ruins have been buried in the dense jungle and considered lost, until recently. In the past few years, a trio of archaeologists have combed through the 17th century Spanish chronicles for location clues and then fed this into a predictive GIS model, factoring in data on the region's terrain, vegetation, and waterways, as well as estimates of colonial-era travel speeds. The model led the archaeologists to the Blue Mountain Biosphere Reserve along the Mexico-Guatemala border. There, they found stone structures, obsidian tools, ceramics, and the ruins of a small Spanish church, physical evidence that matches the Maya stronghold described in the colonial documents. The research team has already completed 2 field seasons at this site, conducting preliminary excavations, with the initial findings indicating that it was occupied during the historical period of the resistance. Future plans for the site include using LiDAR technology to map the area beneath the jungle canopy to try and locate hidden structures. Which of these lost cities was your favorite? Which one do you think is going to be found first? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video or subscribe to the channel before you leave. If you're feeling extra generous, you can give me a super thanks or a Ko-fi donation. If you like the look of my books, head to my Amazon storefront to shop my shelf, or visit my Redbubble shop and get some merch with your favorite archaeology slogan that I've designed. I hope you come away from this video knowing that despite what crazy nonsense the algorithm might be shoving down your throat, real archaeology is alive, well, and working hard every day to find ancient lost cities and expand what we know about the past. Every watch, like, subscribe, and click shows the algorithm that people are interested in learning about real archaeology. So thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, and I hope to see you on my next adventure inside archaeology.